The Bully of Brocas Court, Part 3. The thin stranger had taken off his beaver hat, his swallow tailed coat, his silk waistcoat, and finally his shirt had been drawn over his head by his second. Stevens, in a cool and leisurely fashion, kept pace with the preparations of his antagonist. Then the two fighting men turned upon each other. But as they did so, Stevens gave an exclamation of surprise and horror. The removal of the beaver hat had disclosed a horrible mutilation of the head of his antagonist. The whole upper forehead had fallen in, and there seemed to be a broad red veil between his close-cropped hair and his heavy brows. "Good Lord!" cried the young pugilist. "What's amiss with the man?" The question seemed to rouse a cold fury in his antagonist. "You look out for your own head, master," said he. "You will find enough to do, I'm thinking, without talking about mine." This retort drew a shout of hoarse laughter from his second. "Well said, my Tommy," he cried. "It's a Lombard Street to a China orange on the one and only." The man whom he called Tom was standing with his hands up in the center of the natural ring. He looked a big man in his clothes, but he seemed bigger in the buff. And his barrel chest, sloping shoulders, and loosely slung muscular arms were all ideal for the game. His grim eyes gleamed fiercely beneath his misshapen brows, and his lips were set in a fixed hard smile, more menacing than a scowl. The pugilist confessed as he approached him that he had never seen a more formidable figure, but his bold heart rose to the fact that he had never yet found the man who could master him, and that it was hardly incredible that he would appear as an old-fashioned stranger on a country road. Therefore, with an answering smile, he took up his position and raised his hands. But what followed was entirely beyond his experience. The stranger feinted quickly with his left and sent in a swinging hit with his right, so quick and hard that Stevens had barely time to avoid it and to counter with a short jab as his opponent rushed in upon him. Next instant, the man's bony arms were round him, and the pugilist was hauled into the air in a whirling cross buttock, coming down with a heavy thud upon the grass. The stranger stood back and folded his arms while Stevens scrambled to his feet with a red flush of anger upon his cheeks. "Look here," he cried, "what sort of game is this?" "We claim foul," the baronet shouted. "Foul be damned, as clean a throw as ever I saw," said the stout man. "What rules do you fight under?" "Queensberry, of course." "I never heard of it. It's London prize ring with us." "Come on then," cried Stevens, furiously. "I can wrestle as well as another. You won't get me napping again." Nor did he. The next time that the stranger rushed in, Stevens caught him in as strong a grip, and after swinging and swaying, they came down together in a dogfall. 3 times this occurred, and each time the stranger walked across to his friend and seated himself upon the grassy bank before he recommenced. "What do you make of him?" the baronet asked in one of his pauses. Stevens was bleeding from the ear, but otherwise showed no sign of damage. "He knows a lot," said the pugilist. "I don't know where he learned it, but he's had a deal of practice somewhere. He's as strong as a lion and as hard as a boat. For all his queer face, keep him at outfighting. I think you are his master there." "I'm not so sure that I'm his master anywhere, but I'll try my best." It was a desperate fight, and as round followed round, it became clear, even to the amazed baronet, that the middleweight champion had met his match. The stranger had a clever draw and a rush which, with his springing hits, made him a most dangerous foe. His head and body seemed insensible to blows, and the horribly malignant smile never for one instant flickered from his lips. He hit very hard with fists like flints, and his blows whizzed up from every angle. He had one particularly deadly lead, an uppercut at the jaw, which again and again nearly came home, until at last it did actually fly past the guard and brought Stevens to the ground. The stout man gave a whoop of triumph. The whisker hit, by George, it's a horse to a hen on my Tommy. Another like that, lad, and you have him bit, I say, Stevens. This is going too far, said the baronet, as he supported his weary man. What will the regiment say if I bring you up all knocked to pieces in a by-battle? Shake hands with this fellow and give him best, or you will not be fit for your job. Give him best? Not I, cried Stevens angrily. I'll knock that damned smile off his ugly mug before I've done. What about the sergeant? I'd rather go back to London and never see the sergeant than have my number taken down by this chap. Well, had enough? This opponent asked in a sneering voice as he moved from his seat on the bank. For answer, young Stevens sprang forward and rushed at his man with all the strength that was left to him. By the fury of his onset, he drove him back, and for a long minute had all the better of the exchanges. But this iron fighter seemed never to tire. His step was as quick and his blow as hard as ever. When this long rally had ended, Stevens had eased up from pure exhaustion, but his opponent did not ease up. He came back on him with a shower of furious blows which beat down the very guard of the pugilist. As Stevens was at the end of his strength and would in another instant have sunk to the ground but for a singular intervention. It has been said that in their approach to the ring, the party had paused through a grove of trees. Out of this there came a peculiar shrill cry, a cry of agony which might be from a child or from some small woodland creature in distress. It was inarticulate, high-pitched, and inexpressibly melancholy. At the sound, the stranger who had knocked Stevens onto his knees staggered back and looked round him with an expression of helpless horror upon his face. The smile had left his lips, and there only remained the loose-lipped weakness of a man in the last extremity of terror. It's after me again, might I cried. Stick it out, Tom. You have him nearly beat. It can hurt you. It can hurt me. It will hurt me, screamed the fighting man. My God, I can't face it. I see it. I see it. With a scream of fear, he turned and bounded off into the brushwood. His companions, swearing loudly, picking up the pile of clothes and darted after him, the dark shadows swallowing up their flying figures. Stevens, half senselessly, had staggered back and lay upon the grassy bank, his head pillowed upon the chest of the young baronet, who was holding his flask of brandy to his lips. As they sat there, they were both aware that the cries had become louder and shriller. Then from among the bushes there ran a small white terrier, nosing about as if following a trail and yelping most piteously. It scattered across the grassy sward, taking no notice of the two young men. Then it also vanished into the shadows. As it did so, the two spectators sprang to their feet and ran as hard as they could tear for the gateway and the trap. Terror had seized them, a panic terror far above reason or control. Shivering and shaking, they threw themselves into the dog cart, and it was not until the wheeling horses had put 2 good miles between that ill-omened hollow and themselves that they at last ventured to speak. "Did you ever see such a dog?" asked the baronet. "No," cried Stevens, "and please God I never may again." Late that night the two travellers broke their journey at the Swan Inn, near Harpenden Common. The landlord was an old acquaintance of the baronet's and gladly joined him in a glass of port after supper. A famous old sport was Mr. Joe Homer of the Swan, and he would talk by the hour of the legends of the ring, whether new or old. The name of Stevens was well known to him, and he looked at him with the deepest interest. "Why, sir, you have surely been fighting," said he. "I hadn't to read of any engagement in the papers." "Enough said of that," Stevens answered in a surly voice. Well, no offense, I suppose. His smiling face became suddenly very serious. I suppose you didn't by chance see anything of him they call the bully of brokers as you came north. Well, what if we did? The landlord was tense with excitement. It was him that nearly killed Bob Meadows. It was at the very gate of Broker's old hall that he stopped him. Another man was with him. Bob was game to the marrow. But he was found hit to pieces on the lawn inside the gate where the summer house stands. The baronet nodded. Ah, you have been there, cried the landlord. Well, we may as well make a clean breast of it, said the baronet, looking at Stephen. We have been there, and we met the man you speak of. An ugly customer he is too. Tell me, said the landlord in a voice that sank to a whisper. Is it true that Bob Meadows says that the men are dressed like our grandfathers and that the fighting man has his head all caved in? Well, he was old fashioned, certainly, and his head was the queerest ever I see. God in heaven, cried the landlord. Do you know, sir, that Tom Hickman, the famous prize fighter, together with his pa, Joe Roy, a silversmith of the city, met his death at that very point in the year 1822 when he was drunk and tried to drive on the wrong side of a wagon. Both were killed and the wheel of the wagon crushed in Hickman's forehead. Hickman, Hickman, said the baron. Not the gas man? Yes, sir. They called him Gas. He won his fights with what they call the whisker heat, and no one could stand against him until near him. That they call the Bristol Bull brought him down. Stevens had risen from the table as white as cheese. Let's get out of this, sir. I want fresh air. Let us get on our way. The landlord clapped him on the back. Cheer up, lad. You have held him off anyway, and that's more than anyone else has ever done. Sit down and have another glass of wine. For if a man in England has earned it this night, it's you. There's many a debt you'd pay if you gave the gas man a welting whether dead or alive. Do you know what he did in this very room? The two travellers looked round with startled eyes at the lofty room, stone flagged and oak panelled, with great open grate at the farther end. Yes, in this very room I had it from old Squire Scooter, who was here the very night. It was the day when Shelton beat Josh Hudson out St. Albans way, and Gas had won a pocketful of money on the fight. He and his Paul Roy came in here upon their way, and he was mad, raging drunk. The folk fairly shrunk into the corners and under the tables, for he was talking round with the great kitchen poker in his hand, and there was murder behind the smile upon his face. He was like that when the drink was in him, cruel, reckless, and a terror to the world. Well, what think you that he did at last with the poker? There was a little dog, a terrier as I have heard, coiled up before the fire, for it was a bitter December night. The gas man broke its back with one blow of the poker. Then he burst out laughing, flung a curse or two at the folk that shrunk away from him, and so out to his high gig that was waiting outside. The next we heard was that he was carried down to Finchley with his head ground to a jelly by the wagon wheel. Yes, they do say the little dog with its bleeding skin and its broken back has been seen since then, crawling and yelping about Broker's corner as if it were brooking for the swine that killed it. So you see, Mr. Stevens, you were fighting for more than yourself when you put it across the gas man. Maybe so, said the young prize fighter. But I want no more fights like that. The farrier sergeant is good enough for me, sir, and if it is the same to you, we'll take a railway train back to town. End of The Bully of Brocas Court. Thank you.